Hey, I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I am excited to be here to answer 7 questions that were asked by the developers at the 2D Con Indie Developer Conference. Thank you for watching this at the conference. I hope it's going well. I hope you're having a great time, and really thank you for the opportunity to answer some of your questions here today. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, that's great too. I'm here to talk about game design and some questions about publishing, game design, and a few other topics today in these 7 questions. So let's jump right in. I'll talk about these questions. So the first question is, what is the best way for an indie developer to approach you? And I want to answer this in 2 quick ways because one one aspect of this is a slightly semantics, but I think it matters a little bit because the term developer is used differently in digital game design versus the tabletop game industry. A developer in the tabletop game industry is someone who takes a game that already exists, so a game that has already been designed, and not published, but designed and play tested, and they make it better. They make it more fun, more balanced, more intuitive, just better, more functional. A designer is someone who comes up with an idea, they create a prototype, they play test it, they iterate, they make it better and better until it is what they think is maybe a complete game. And then ideally, when they hand it off to a publisher or a developer, publishers often act as developers, they make it even better. So I wanted to differentiate between those 2 terms, that if you were talking about designing a game, the term is designer. You're a game designer, not a game developer in the tabletop game industry. But back to the question, what is the best way? And so I'm going to answer this, I guess, in 2 different ways, just in case the person was asking truly about the word developer. What's the best way for an indie developer to approach me? So developer would be someone who's coming to me and saying, hey, I don't want to design games. I want to make the games that you have even better. And for us, I actually act as the developer at Stonemaier Games. I am the developer here. So I'm not looking for developers to approach me. That's not a role I'm looking to fill. However, I am often looking for playtesters, and if you ever want to sign up as a playtester for Stonemaier Games, the way to do so is to sign up as a Stonemaier ambassador, which is a volunteer for Stonemaier Games. And every couple years, I send out a survey, a quiz to determine who might be good to add to our playtester list. And that's how we add playtesters to our master lead playtester list. If you are looking, if the question is about being a designer, someone who is creating a game from scratch, the best way for a designer to approach us is to look at the submissions form on our website. Actually, really, the first step is to design the game. Not just the idea, create the idea, the prototype, play test it, iterate it, play test it, iterate it, make it better and better. And then, if you think it is a good fit for Stonemaier Games based on our submission guidelines, as posted on our website, follow the instructions there. It involves submitting some information about the game to us via a form, and we use that as the first filter to determine if it is a good fit for Stonemaier Games. The second question is, do you prefer licensing a game or buying the rights to it outright? When might you choose differently? This is an interesting question because they're very similar things, license a game versus buying the rights to it outright. What we do at Stonemaier Games is that when someone fills out that submission form and we decide, oh, this is a game that we really want to publish, we reach out to that designer, and usually there's a ongoing process, some back and forth between us to see if the designer is actually someone that we want to work with, because we're going to work with them on an ongoing basis for a while. But if we determine that it is the right game for Stonemaier Games and the right designer, then we will offer to buy the rights to the game. We want to acquire the rights. We're not looking to have part of the rights. We're looking to have the whole rights because we're going to invest heavily in this game and put a lot of risk on our shoulders because of our investment into the game. We're the ones that are going to be paying for the art and the marketing and the print runs and the shipping and all that stuff. And so the agreement that we have with designers is that we control the rights to the game, but they get credit for it, they get an advance on royalties, and they get a royalty payment from then on. And of course, if the time comes that we have stopped printing the game for an extended period of time, the rights will revert to the designer. Licenses are typically used for intellectual properties. And the game is an intellectual property, but more like when we published our Red Rising game. So Red Rising is a novel series, and we published a game. I co-designed and published a game based on this series. We licensed the rights, the tabletop rights, for Red Rising from the author, Pierce Brown. So that is when a licensing agreement is in place. That's where Pierce has all the rights to Red Rising. He owns the intellectual property, and we're licensing just a little piece of that so that we can make a tabletop game in that world. Question 3 is, what do you look for in a sell sheet? And I'll be honest and say that I rarely look at sell sheets. Sell sheets I'm much more interested in knowing about the game, and really the ideal way for me to learn about a game, if someone wants to pitch a game to us and they make it through the first few filters of that form, that submission form, is a video that shows us how the game works. Just a 5 to 10 minute video, no clever editing. You can just turn on the camera and show us the game and show us a few turns of the game in action. That is, I would say, more effective than a sell sheet. However, sell sheets can be helpful at conventions. So if you are pitching your game to publishers at conventions, having a sell sheet so say you've spent 30 minutes with a publisher, you've shown them a few turns of the game, that publisher is going to be doing a lot of other things and meeting with a lot of other people at that convention. And so the purpose of the sell sheet after that is to help them when they get back home and they're processing all the things that they did at the convention. It helps them remember what those 30 minutes were, what your game was, so they can decide, oh, that was a game that I was really interested in. I want to reach out to that publisher and learn more. So the main purpose of the sell sheet, I think, is to help a publisher remember what that experience was like and to highlight a few different things, to highlight your name, the game's name, your email, how to contact you, your email address. And ideally, it would also highlight visually with an infographic. You don't want to just use words and don't want to just use images. Use a combination of the two. That highlights a few of the core features that make the game stand out. So point out a few core mechanisms. If you have a really clever component that you think would work well in the game, you can highlight that on the sell sheet. So a few of those core things that explain what makes the game special. I think that helps the publisher remember what made the game special if they had the chance to play it for 30 minutes. Now, going around a convention and just handing sell sheets to publishers, that's going to do very little. And really, that might actually do less. It may be worse than nothing, because you're kind of showing those publishers that you don't care which publisher it is. You just want any publisher to take it. Whereas publishers are going to feel much better about pursuing your game if they feel like you have selected them from the wide pool of publishers and said, oh, I think this publisher, this specific publisher, or these 3 specific publishers are a great fit for this specific game, rather than just tossing sell sheets left and right. Fourth question is, how do you choose who to bring into your company to grow your workforce when you're just starting out? This is a great question about forming a publishing company rather than just being a game designer. When I started out alone. I was designing viticulture for the purpose of putting viticulture on Kickstarter. I wasn't really intending to make a company. I just wanted to make a game. And I also wanted to run a Kickstarter campaign. So I wanted to have that little slice of entrepreneurship and see what that experience was like. And I thought I was going to do it alone, but I found early on that I needed playtesters. I needed friends to help me playtest the game because I wanted the game to actually be good and actually function. And most of those playtests were pretty brutal because the game wasn't very good yet. And when a game isn't very good, it's taxing on friends where you could be playing a published game that you already know works, but instead you're playing this game that doesn't work very well. But after one of those playtests, my friend Alan reached out to me and he was like, hey, the game definitely needs work, but I had a lot of fun talking about it and playing it, and I'd like to be more involved. And I didn't realize until that moment how much it would mean for someone to say that to me, and that having that sort of partnership, someone who I didn't feel guilty about playtesting my game with, how big of a difference that would make. And so that formed a partnership with my friend Alan, where we had to work out some things early on as to who was doing what and whose role was, what our different roles were. And in the end, it ended up being that I ran Stonemaier Games pretty much by myself for a long time. But Alan was always there for me to bounce questions off of, for me to playtest with. He had a pretty heavy hand in the viticulture design, where we playtested it all the time, and he would offer a lot of feedback, and then I'd go back and incorporate that feedback. But having that other person, that partner, even if you're doing most of the work, but that partner is there when you need them, I think can make a big difference. So how do you choose who to do that? I mean, it's hard to choose one specific person, but I think there are two ways that you can do it. One is that you can do it the way I did it and just share your game with a lot of different people and see if someone else seems to share your passion for that game. I think that's one way to do it. The other way, and or, is to look at your skill sets and look at the people that you know, or the people that you could know. There are many people in networks that you can actively grow if you choose to. People who have skills that you don't have. So, for example, if I decided to design a game and put a game on Kickstarter, but I was only excited about the game design side of it, or maybe only excited about the Kickstarter side of it, then I might have tried to find someone who was really good and really passionate about the other side of those two things. It just so happened that I was excited about both of those aspects. But oftentimes, I think there are a lot of designers who just want to design games and don't want to run a company and don't want all the risk that comes with running a company. But maybe they're still interested in some element of self-publishing. And so that might be where you find someone who is really interested in the business side of things and work with them. But yeah, find someone whose skills complement yours. But I'd also recommend early on that you try to do as much as you can yourself and while still making the game marketable. It's kind of a fine line here, but I say that because there are many things that you can do yourself, but if you are not a talented graphic designer, if you are not a talented artist, I would highly recommend outsourcing to people who are highly talented graphic designers and artists if you are trying to run a publishing company. That isn't your job as a game designer, but that's part of your job as a game publisher. Rather than trying to make up for those skills, because those poor graphic design, poor art, poor rulebook layout and creation will greatly impede your products, your game's chances of being successful. So you have to kind of figure out those categories of what you can do yourself, what types of partnerships you will benefit from in the long term, and what are those skills that are crucial to the marketing of the game that you don't have that you need to outsource to other people. Question number 5 is, how much time did you spend networking to get into the industry? I mean, my instinctive answer is almost no time. I'm not someone who spends a lot of time networking. Honestly, when looking back, the main form of networking that I did as I was working on viticulture is that I tried to reach out publicly to reviewers, content creators, and other publishers just to engage with their work. And so this is kind of a social media version of networking. So this was me like backing other Kickstarter campaigns for other game projects and actively being active on the project itself. So commenting on the project, contributing to the project a little bit here and there, making myself visible to that creator just a little bit in case, I don't know, just both for goodwill and for the experience of engaging in conversations about game design and game publishing and games. But also because every now and then I would reach out to one of those publishers and say, hey, like, I really appreciate your work and thank you for what you've created. Just to have those connections early on were pretty helpful. I also did that with content creators and reviewers, where if I saw it, I started following various reviewers and content creators, and every now and then I would comment on their posts or their videos, or and just to be an active part of their community, so that in the hopes that someday if I wanted to reach out to them and say, hey, I have a game that's on Kickstarter, or it's coming up on Kickstarter, would you be open to reviewing it or reviewing a prototype of it, that they might be a little bit more open to that, because that wasn't my first contact with them. I already had some contact with them in the comments of their content. So that is my version of networking. I'm an introvert, so I'm not actively seeking all that many local game design communities. I am involved in some of them. I was more involved back then, but you can do that if you prefer that. Also, going to conventions. You can go to conventions and just hang out with people and have good times at conventions. I don't know necessarily if that will result in anything discernible for the future, anything measurable in the future, but it also can't hurt. And if you're having fun, that's important too. Number 6 is, what kind of events were the most useful to you in your journey to become a publisher? And this ties into my last answer a little bit. Really, I didn't attend any game conventions until after Viticulture was released. It was after that that I attended Geekway to the West here in St. Louis. That was my first gaming convention. I attended, there were some local game design meetups that I attended through meetup.org, but I've attended very few events early on. I was looking to improve the game through my existing social network, my existing friends, rather than reaching out beyond that to the broader game industry. However, I was trying to be more active, like I said, on Kickstarter, on reviewer websites and YouTube channels, things like that, and on Board Game Geek. I was definitely trying to be more active on Board Game Geek than I'd had leading up to Viticulture. I had very little exposure to Board Game Geek, whereas now it's part of my day. I check Board Game Geek every hour almost for various updates and for comments and to answer questions and things like that. But I will say that a lot of people do get a lot out of conventions. It isn't something that I actively pursue, but currently I attend two conventions. One, I attend Geekway to the West every year. It's here in St. Louis. It's a convention where I just go and play games with a variety of people, which is a form of networking for sure. I'm networking with people who want to play games with me, but I'm also learning from those games. I love to learn from games that have been published that I haven't played yet. And so as a designer, that is a big benefit for me as well. But I'm not there to sell. We have a booth there, but it's run by one of my coworkers. I'm not involved in the selling aspect at game conventions. Same with Gen Con. We have a booth at Gen Con, but I'm not really involved in it personally. Whereas as a company, we are involved in that. But I am more interested in the human element of it and the playing games element of events like that. We also run an event at Stonemaier Games called the Stonemaier Games Design Day. It's an annual event that's a little bit like Protospiel or Unpub, if you've heard of those playtesting events. It's a very structured day where people bring their games to playtest and they playtest other games. That's an event that we host that we do because it feels like a nice thing to do for our community. And I think maybe that has helped some people get off the ground, get their design off the ground, and get their company off the ground. So if you have access to an event like Unpub or Protospiel or the Design Day, if you're ever able to attend the Design Day, those might be helpful for you as a designer or a publisher as well. And the last question is, what does your playtesting and refinement process look like? So a very brief version of this, and I'll link to a video I'll link to a video in the description of the YouTube version of this video, because I have a video that details this in like 20 minutes. But the very brief version of it is that when I design a game, I spend a lot of time brainstorming the game, coming up with a concept, what I think it might be. I create a prototype for the game, and then I get it to the table, typically with only one other person or even by myself, just to kind of go through the motions of the game to see all the many things that don't work as well in reality as they worked in my head, which are always many, many different things. And then I'll repeat that process very low key. So either with me or with one, maybe at most two other people for a while until the game is starting to really take shape. And then I usually bring it to a broader group, a broader local group. Oftentimes my coworkers, sometimes some friends who might be interested in playtesting it. We playtest it. We'll playtest the game. I'll continue to iterate, playtest, iterate until it becomes what I consider both fun and functional. It's still a far cry from the final game that it will be, but if it is fun and functional, then I'm comfortable sending it out to our lead blind playtesters. So those are people around the world who have told me that they are interested in, and based on our quiz, they are good at offering feedback about our games. The types of things I look at a playtester are generally someone who is going to tell me what happened, and maybe why they think it happened and how it made them feel. I am not generally looking for playtesters to tell me how to fix things. That's my job as a designer. I need to know the information from them, the what happened and why it happened, so I can decide what's best for the game. So we have usually a multi-wave blind playtesting process where I send the game to usually 5 or 6 lead playtesters. They playtest the game with their group, typically around 3 times each. And then I take all that feedback that they send me. It's usually some written feedback, mostly it's a form feedback, some data, and then a long form email of summarizing their thoughts about the game. And I take that and I try to improve the game. I iterate, I playtest the game again, and then I send it back out to blind playtesters. And we do that a minimum of 3 times, sometimes even up to 6 or 7 times, these multiple waves of blind playtesting. And in between, I'll playtest it locally here in St. Louis to make sure that the game is playing as I hope it will. And then eventually the game, through a combination of feeling like the game is ready and seeing that most of the playtester reports that we're getting are scoring the game 8, 9, or 10, that is an indication to us that the game is ready to move forward with publication. So yeah, that is a very brief overview of our playtesting and refinement process. That is a big part of the development process of a game, where you are taking a game that already works, it's fun and functional, and you're making it better. You're making it more balanced, you're making it more fun, more intuitive, and even more functional. Yeah. Thank you so much for thinking of these questions. I appreciate the variety of these questions about both design, submitting games to publishers, and even becoming a publisher yourself. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to post them in the comments of the YouTube version of this video, and I look forward to answering them there. Thanks. Enjoy the convention if you were at 2DCon, the indie developers section of that convention. Take care.